Explaining Ukraine is a podcast by Ukraine World, a website in English about Ukraine. My name is Volodymyr Yermolenko. I'm Ukrainian philosopher and chief editor of Ukraine World. My guest is Alena Khryshko, analyst at Ukraine World, who is analyzing the Russian disinformation, Russian propaganda for our website. Ukraine World is brought to you by Internews Ukraine, one of the biggest Ukrainian media NGOs. Before we start, let me remind you that you can support us on patreon.com/UkraineWorld. You can also support our volunteer trips to the front line at PayPal, ukraine.resisting@gmail.com. Today is our serious propaganda diary, and we are discussing in this episode what is this buzz, what is this information context in which Russia is trying to promote its agenda on the question of Black Sea Initiative and Black Sea Grain Deal. On the issue of Ukrainian exports of grain and other foodstuff to many countries of the world, and how Russia is actually trying to block it. So, Alena, hello and thanks so much for joining this episode. So let us discuss the context, what this Black Sea Grain Initiative is about. Let me remind you that actually, when Russia started its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, it very much damaged the Ukrainian access to the Black Sea. Ukraine has a big Black Sea coast, and of course it was quite limited already since 2014 when Russia annexed Crimea, and then after its full-scale invasion in February and March 2022, Russia was attacking Ukrainian ports and blocking Odessa port. There are 3 ports in Odessa which actually taking care of much of the exportation of Ukrainian products, primarily foodstuff products. And the important port of Mariupol, which is totally destroyed by the Russian army. The city is now occupied. Russians also blocked the city of Mykolaiv and was shelling the city for many months, over the half of the year, more than half of the year. So this, of course, created problems. And at a certain point, Ukraine was not able to export its foodstuff globally. And about 400 million people in the world depend on this or that respect on the Ukrainian food, on the Ukrainian grain. And therefore it was important, it was of key importance to ensure these exports in a situation, of course, when Russia can shoot at vessels or block them from taking the routes through Bosphorus and Dardanelles, and then to the Mediterranean Sea, and then to the global oceans. But what is the situation right now? What is at stake? Can you explain, Alena?
Yeah, Volodya, definitely. It's quite an important question to be discussed today because the Black Sea Grain Initiative creates so-called maritime humanitarian corridor for vessels that live in Ukrainian ports. And this was signed in July 2022. And right now there is a question whether it's going to be prolonged and how long it's going to take this agreement to work anymore. And today, Russia using this topic as a kind of blackmailing regarding the continuation of this grain agreement. And then necessary to point it out that take into account the last statistics on the United Nations World Food Program. According to these numbers, United Nations World Food Program has chartered 16 humanitarian shipments out of Ukraine to countries like Ethiopia, Yemen, Afghanistan, and Somalia. So we are talking about the countries which are much needed Ukrainian food products. And this is quite important that there would be a high level of security for transporting this kind of vessels. So if we are talking about the Russian, they are using this kind of blackmailing and accusing the other parts of this agreement. Let's remember the period when this was the first time question for prolonging this agreement. It was October 2022, when Russia said that the movement of ships is going to be unacceptable via this corridor already agreed, and there was a high level of risk that this Green Deal would be stopped that period.
Yeah, so Russia was actually saying, to explain, right, that Ukraine, it cannot guarantee whether through this corridor what is actually going to the Ukrainian ports, whether Ukraine is actually importing arms, and whether it's preparing, its military operation against Russia, all this, disinformation. Therefore, it was trying to weaken this deal as much as possible. Why? To get some positive things for itself, and therefore it was trying to blackmail the whole international community. Let us remind that one of the sides of the Green Deal is actually United Nations. So to say that, look, this is not foodstuff. This is something else. What else? It is also important to understand how, for example, Russia sees the conditions under which this Green Deal will be prolonged, and it tries to get some benefits for itself, including the liberating of its own exports, both food and not food, and as well as lifting sanctions. What can you say about this?
Yeah, there is also several statements regarding this, and the newest one was related to the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs when they told that Russia is ready to participate for and vote for continuation of Green Initiative, but only for 60 days, because, as they said, some barriers remains. And as you've mentioned, they were talking about the exporters, Russian export, mainly about agriculture and the sanctioned withdrawals for food and fertilizers from Russian Federation. This was said in Geneva on March 13, just before the possibility for prolonging this initiative. And to be honest, Russia's position, as they declared, depend on the real progress on some benefits for Russian Federation, meaning some bank payments, transport logistics, probably insurance, and of course, we're talking about the ammonia supply through Telyatty-Odessa pipeline. This is a kind of the blackmailing that Russia used as the condition for prolonging the grain initiative.
Yeah, so Russia is keen to get its ammonia to the global markets and to use also the Odessa port for ensuring its own exports. What was the reaction of Ukraine? What was the reaction of President Zelensky on this?
Yes, definitely. This kind of the blackmailing is not working anymore, to be honest. Anyway, if we are talking about the possibility of using like this a condition from Russian Federation and accepting this position from them, it's not really working in our way. This was not the first time when Russian Federation suggested some such way of during the negotiation about the grain initiative. And let's remember September previous year, 2022, when there's also was the suggestion from a Russian representative that they are going to use our Odessa port to receive ammonia from Russian companies. And this, honestly, before the full-scale invasion, this was a kind of the transport on our territory. But since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, the transporting has been stopped. And that's okay. And it's really logic in this way. But our president, President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, he definitely said that there is possible to turn back to this question, the supply of ammonia from the Russian Federation through our territory, but only in exchange for Ukrainian prisoners of the war that are in Russia right now. And this was his condition in September previous year. So probably since that period, something has been changed regarding the Telyatty-Odessa pipeline. But There is also from Russian Federation there was several statements according to which they are, to be honest, they're trying to discredit this suggestion, like comparing human's life and some so-called export, which are not really important, but how really they are your president to do like this. And this was the statement from Dmitry Peskov, the spokesman for Russian president.
And it's important to also to locate it in the context, because Russians are trying to say that, okay, this is the Ukraine is guilty for not exporting food, and therefore people who need this food, especially in countries which really need Ukrainian exports, like African countries or Asian countries, where a big amount of Ukrainian exports actually go. This is Ukraine to blame. And for example, Ukraine doesn't also want to ensure these exports of ammonia. Ammonia is used in fertilizers. Fertilizers are also needed to enhance the agriculture in many different parts of the world. But it all kind of masks the key reason for that. The key cause of what is happening is the Russian invasion, is the fact that Russia tries to control the whole of the Black Sea, including the international waters. It is trying to limit as possible, it was actually trying to limit to zero Ukrainian shipment movements in the Black Sea, and this is the primary cause. Russia is trying to reverse the situation, put things on their head, but we should understand that this is the primary goal. Let us discuss what Russia is actually saying about the geography of the Ukrainian grain exports, because there is a clear disinformation from Russian President Putin that only 3% of the grain which Ukraine exports, including through these ports, is going to Africa, and the most of the products are sent to well-fed countries. What can you say about these statements and how Ukraine reacted to them?
This is like the last statement on March 20th and this year. And to be honest, Russia always tried to criticize the implementation of Green Deal, and they are trying to use including the volume of the grain supplies to poorer countries as the way to show that the conditions is unacceptable. Ukraine can't provide what they promised, and let's be honest, this is one of the narratives that Russia is going to spread like worldwide. Ukraine is not ready for this kind of transporting, and if we are talking about the Ukraine as the part of this agreement, that Ukraine is not reliable as the participant of this agreement. And if we are talking about the numbers that has been provided, this means exactly that Russia, as they said, Russia's president, he told that they are going to insist on the full implementation of the grain deal, meaning the African countries who are less receive the provided grain, despite the fact. So they are talking about the fact that this initiative is not more a humanitarian help for the third countries, but exactly like the possibility for providing business for the well-fed countries. And there was interesting the response from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine. They provided the exactly numbers about the amount of the grain that has been transported during using this grain corridor. And if we are talking about the correct numbers, it's necessary to mention Oleg Nikolenko, who is the spokesman of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine. And he wrote on his Facebook page the truth about the real numbers. Let's mention the statistics on grain shipment to 45 countries of the world. This was like the numbers of August 2022, and it means that Africa, according to these numbers, receive almost 3 million tons, which means 11 and 6%. Asia received a little bit more than 12 million tons, so means almost half of half percent, and Europe a little bit more than 10 million tons, so it's 40.2%. This is the exactly numbers received from the official representatives from Ukraine. And if we are talking about one of the narratives that Russia uses, like Africa is not receiving enough grain during this grain initiative, let's just remember it's 3 million tons, so 11 and 6%. But let's remember the fact that Europe is sent also humanitarian aid, this grain, like re-exporting to Africa and Asia. So it means that the real numbers of the export to African continent even higher than this 11 and 6%.
Yeah, we have to remember that Ukraine has an association and free trade agreement with the European Union, and this explains why a big number, 40% of the Ukrainian grain exports are going to the European Union, 10 million tons. And as Nikolenko says, from the European Union, this grain can be re-exported to, and is being re-exported to, for example, to African or Asian countries. But we can also assume that foodstuff produced in Europe can also go to with the Ukrainian grain can go also to these countries. But it's important to know that the first place is taken by Asia, right? 48% of the Ukrainian exports, over 12 million tons, is actually going to Asian countries. And 3 million tons, 11% going to Africa. So if we combine Asia and Africa, it will obviously outnumber European countries. And this is what Nikolenko was saying. So Putin's statement that only 3% of these Ukrainian grain exports are going to African countries and the rest is going to well-fed countries is simply not true. At least according to the Ukrainian statistics. Okay, so let's summarize. Let's wrap up. What is the situation right now? Whether the deal is prolonged, because we are really sitting on this time bomb. Every certain number of months, there is a new negotiation, new talks, and Russia tries to get benefits for itself. In order and threatens with blocking the grain deal. But at the same time, we should understand that, well, what can it do? What can it do to block it? Will it, shell the civilian ships with grain? We hope not, but at least it can block. It can block inspections over them, because Russia has a right to inspect the Ukrainian ships, and therefore these ships can just stand in line waiting for these inspections. And there is also a question for long-term contracts. Of course, there is lots of details about that, but let's summarize what we have now about the prolongation.
There was like the discussion about how long it's going to be prolonged, for how long it's going to work. And Ukrainian side suggests that would be like a useful idea if it would be prolonged for 120 days. I think this is a good way, as it shows its effectiveness during the first time. And on March 18, there was a confirmation from Ukrainian side, Ukraine's Minister of Infrastructure, that the deal has been prolonged for 120 days. And it seems everything is okay, so we are continue to work under the grain initiative. But Russia's foreign ministry spokesman Maria Zakharova, she reiterated that Russia agreed only for 60 days prolongation. And nowadays, we, to be honest, don't know exactly how long this initiative is going to work anymore, because for Russia, this is one of the tools. So food is this grain initiative is a kind of weapon that can be used for blackmailing the world. And after the statements from Zakharova, I think we might thought that this is more a geopolitical kind of blackmailing on the international level. To be honest, the United Nations just welcomed the extension of the deal without specifying its length. So we are waiting for the duration, how it's going to work for the next, 2 months, probably 3 months.
Okay, so let's follow. This is, of course, the global issue, and it shows how the Russian invasion of Ukraine actually has a global impact. Let me remind that 400 million people in that respect rely upon Ukrainian foodstuff. Ukraine is exporting its food to majority of the countries of the world. It is the brain basket not only of Europe but of the whole world. As we can see, the majority of food exports go to Asia, and Russia, of course, tries to use it first to get the benefits for itself, to lift sanctions or to ensure the exports of its own foodstuff or of fertilizers. And secondly, of course, to blame Ukraine and blame the West for all the situation, and to say that this is because of Ukraine that poorer countries do not get food, which is, of course, a lie, which is a big lie and a big propaganda, because it's because Russia attacked Ukraine and invaded Ukraine that we have such global problems. Thank you, Alona. This was a podcast explaining Ukraine in our serious propaganda diary. Explaining Ukraine is a podcast by Ukraine World, a website in English about Ukraine. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast, and don't forget to support us on patreon.com/UkraineWorld. You can also support our volunteer trips to the frontline areas at PayPal, ukraine.resisting@gmail.com. Ukraine World is brought to you by Internews Ukraine, one of the largest Ukrainian media NGOs. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your support. Stay with us and stay